taking care of her mother. So yeah, we've just got parent issues and family issues all over the place. Frank is signing his escrow docs. That's why he's not here.
Good for
So he was all upset because, you know, it's really late in Texas. So why are they sending the docs now? It's just like, that's crazy. So at any rate, yes, we have a few teeth missing tonight, but we are going to carry on. We are on page 83. We are really to the end of this book practically. So we've been talking about prayer and ministry. And as Nouwen likes to do is to break things into threes, that perfect number. So he said that the prayer and ministry, this discipline of bringing prayer into ministry, and for our purposes, just prayer into our everyday lives and our relationships and our interactions, is formulated in three ways. That the prayer of the heart is nurtured by short, simple prayers. The prayer of the heart is unceasing, and the prayer of the heart is all-inclusive. So the last week we talked about the prayer of the heart in short, simple prayers, and we connected that with the study that we're doing on Sundays through the Sermon on the Mount, because it was just talking about prayer and keeping them short. Now we're going to go into the unceasing nature of prayer. So that'll be up for tonight. Before we dive into the text, anybody have some holdovers from last week? Anything that you wanted to bring up? A lot of times William is percolating all week long and comes up with stuff, but not tonight. No? Okay, no worries. Anyone else? Hi, Carol. Carol snuck in during prayer. And Patricia, are you still there?
Still here.
Okay, just checking. You went dark on us, so had to check. Okay, page 83, unceasing. The second characteristic of the prayer of the heart is that it is unceasing. The question of how to follow Paul's command to pray without ceasing has had a central place in hesychasm from the time of the Desert Fathers to 19th century Russia. There are many examples of this concern from both ends of the hesychastic tradition. During the period of the Desert Fathers, that would be 3rd to the 4th centuries, there was a pietistic sect called the Messalians. These were people who had an overly spiritualized approach to prayer and considered manual work condemnable for a monk. How convenient, right? We don't do manual work, you know. So this is the classic Mary and Martha dualism, right? Okay, so they are all going to be Mary. They're going to sit at the Lord's feet and they are just going to listen. You know, they're not going to do Martha's work. That's for somebody else. And these pietists, they were the ones who really were making this fine line between the two. Some of the monks of this sect went to see Abba Lucius. The old man asked them, "What is your manual work?" And they said, "We do not touch manual work, but as the apostle says, we pray without ceasing." The old man asked them if they did not eat, and they replied, they did. So he said to them, "When you are eating, who prays for you then?" Again, he asked them if they did not sleep. And when they replied they did, he asked them, "When you are asleep, who prays for you then?" They could not find any answers to give him. So he said to them, "Forgive me, but you do not act as you speak. I will show you how. While I am doing my manual work, I pray without interruption. I sit down with God, soaking my reeds and plaiting my ropes, and I say, 'God, have mercy on me, according to your great goodness and according to the multitude of your mercies, save me from my sins.'" So he asked them if this were not prayer, and they replied that it was. Then he said to them, "So when I have spent the whole day working and praying, making 13 pieces of money, more or less, I put 2 pieces of money outside the door, and I pray for my food with the rest of the money. He who takes the 2 pieces of money prays for me when I am eating and when I am sleeping. So by the grace of God, I fulfill the precept to pray without ceasing." This story offers a very practical answer to the question, how can I pray without ceasing while I am busy with many other things? The answer involves the neighbor. Through my charity, my neighbor becomes a partner in my prayer and makes it into unceasing prayer. A couple of weeks ago, I think it was, I brought up that strange parable that Jesus talks about of the unrighteous steward. Remember this one? So you got this steward, this manager who works for a wealthy landowner, and he's embezzling. He's misusing the funds. He's cheating, and the master finds out about it and calls him to account and says, "Hey, you got to make an accounting of things because you're no longer going to be my manager." And so the manager turns around as he's leaving, and he's thinking to himself, "What am I going to do? You know, I'm too weak to dig, and I'm too proud to beg." I love that line. Too weak to dig and too proud to beg. And he's thinking, what am I going to do when I'm no longer a manager? And he says, I know what. He says, I'm going to make a soft landing for myself. And so he brings in his master's debtors. And he says to the first one, what do you owe my master? And he says, 80 measures of wheat. And he says, well, sit down, write 50 quickly and go. And then another one, what do you owe? And he says, I owe this much. And he cuts his debt down. And he goes through the master's debtors that way, cutting down their debts. And when the master finds out about it, he says, he commends the unrighteous steward for his shrewdness. And then Jesus turns to his followers and say, these sons of the earth are much more shrewd in their workings with each other than are the sons of light. He said, so make for yourselves friends by use of the unrighteous mammon. Now remember we talked about this? It sounds so immoral. What in the world is going on? What is Jesus talking about here? The key to understanding that is that the unrighteous mammon, we think, is wealth that was unrighteously obtained, when really it's wealth that was unrighteously retained. The idea here is once you have covered your own needs, anything that you make that's above that should be free to flow to those who need it. You don't dam it up, you don't hold on to it, you don't store it up, you don't sock it away. And so once you have what you need, then let the rest fly. So basically that's what the unrighteous steward was doing. The things that were above and beyond what the master needed to run his household, he was letting flow back to these debtors. And therefore he was making friends so that he would have a soft landing when he no longer had a place to be. They would take them into his home because he had helped them. What Jesus is saying is, do the same. Help those when they need help so that they can help you when you need help. Therefore, your praying will be unceasing. No, he didn't say that. But do you see the connection here to what this story is all about? He makes 13 pieces of money, more or less. He needs 11 to cover his expenses. So the other 2, he can leave outside his door. And so that person can be praying for him and create the soft landing that he needs if the situation were reversed. Kind of an interesting concept here, this idea of prayer being shared now within the community. So that way it becomes unceasing, because obviously we can't physically do it 24/7, but within the community, yes, we can. A few years ago, it was a vineyard, and they wanted to have 24/7 worship going on all the time. And so they were trying to recruit different churches that would worship, on a set schedule 24 hours a day. So someplace within Orange County, there would be one church band that was playing worship somewhere. I don't know where they got the ones that are going to go from 3 to 4 in the morning or something like that. But that was the idea, that they're going to have 24/7 worship, but it was going to be among all the churches in the area. Same kind of concept here. So kind of interesting. Any thoughts, any comments? Does this seem like it's getting to where Paul was trying to get us with unceasing prayer? See, I think Paul is speaking a little bit more along the lines of where Nouwen is going to go next, but it is an interesting take that the Desert Fathers had. So let's continue on. In the 19th century, when the problems with the Messalians did not exist, a more mystical response was given. We find it in the famous story about a Russian peasant called the Way of the Pilgrim. It begins as follows. By the grace of God, I am a Christian man, but by my actions, a great sinner. On the 24th Sunday after Pentecost, I went to church to say my prayers during the liturgy. The first epistle of St. Paul to the Thessalonians was being read. And among other words, I heard these: pray without ceasing. It was this text, more than any other, which forced itself upon my mind. And I began to think how it was possible to pray without ceasing, since a man has to concern himself with other things in order to make a living. The peasant went from church to listen to sermons, but did not find the answer he desired. Finally, he met a holy starets. So a starets is Russian for an elder, and one who has advanced to the point that they can now counsel others and guide others. So he met a holy starets who said to him, ceaseless interior prayer is a continual yearning of the human spirit towards God. Ceaseless interior prayer is a continual yearning of the human spirit towards God. So now we're getting to Selah, the Aramaic for prayer. That was an inclining toward, a leaning into. Remember, it's an attitude of being totally aware and anticipating some kind of connection, something that would happen, coming from that hunting term, as you're waiting in the blinds for the trap to be sprung. So same kind of idea here. Ceaseless interior prayer is a continual yearning of the human spirit towards God. To succeed in this consoling exercise, we must pray more often to God to teach us to pray without ceasing. Pray more and pray more fervently. It is prayer itself which will reveal to you how it can be achieved unceasingly, but it will take some time. Okay, so he's saying pray more, and that's going to take you into a breakthrough, a way of being able to pray unceasing. Then the Holy Starets taught the peasant the Jesus prayer. Lord Jesus Christ, have mercy on me. Now, these early Christians would say that prayer hundreds and hundreds of times a day. It would just be over and over again, like a mantra. They would say it. While traveling as a pilgrim through Russia, the peasant repeats this prayer thousands of times with his lips. He even considers the Jesus prayer to be his true companion. And then one day he has the feeling that the prayer by its own action passes from his lips to his heart. He says, it seems as though my heart, in its ordinary beating, began to say the words of the prayer within at each beat. I gave up saying the prayer with my lips. I simply listened carefully to what my heart was saying. That's pretty beautiful, you got to admit, right? It seemed as though my heart in its ordinary beating began to say the words of the prayer within at each beat. I gave up saying the prayer with my lips. I simply listened carefully to my heart, to what my heart was saying. After saying the prayer so many times, as some of the others would say, the prayer was saying them. They weren't saying the prayer was saying them. It just became part of their DNA, part of their makeup. What we're talking about here is a prayer that is bringing the awareness of God's presence back into focus. And by saying it over and over again, you're practicing just a way of awareness, a way of living in that kind of awareness, so that it just becomes part of your waking day. So that's why contemplative practice is all about the practice and the development of awareness, that we are really aware where we are every moment, and we're aware of God's presence and aware of connection with each other. And then that just becomes who we are in many ways. So we say the prayer until we don't need to say the prayer again. Think of it in terms of what Jesus said. We're going to need the law until heaven and earth pass away. In other words, until heaven and earth merge into oneness. Then we don't need the law anymore, because now the law is internalized. The law is written on our hearts. So we don't need the written law. We don't need to be following rules anymore. We're just living our lives as we would live it. And we're making choices that are now fulfilling the intent of the law, because this merging has taken place. We are now aware of same concept that's going on here, same idea that's going on here. We only need the law until we don't need it anymore. We only need the prayer until we don't need it anymore. It's like training wheels on a bike, you know? At a certain point, you don't need the training wheels anymore. They're just slowing you down. They're just in the way. And so we need them until we don't need them anymore. And this is the idea here with this type of prayer. Any thoughts on that? Questions? Making sense?
The prayer that you're talking about, is that by any chance in part of your, what you gave to me and probably some other people to read, to have to read?
I lost you there halfway through, Linda. Didn't catch your question.
So the prayer that you're referring to, do we say it at church, or are we supposed to?
No. And in fact, this isn't something that we are going to try to do ourselves necessarily. You know, there are other techniques to be able to achieve the same thing. But this is two ways that these ancient Christians did it. You know, first communally, by having other people part of the community, and through your charity, it creates this seamless prayer, or through saying a prayer over and over again until it became a part of you. But there are other ways to do this, and contemplative practice and centering prayer, as we have been talking about it here at the Effect, is another way to do the same thing. But it's all about building awareness. You know, even the one who's doing the work, right? He's doing the work to earn his 13 pieces of money. He's doing the work prayerfully. As he's working, he is praying at the same time. And he's doing his work with that awareness of God's presence and the reason that he's doing the work, how his product is going to bless someone else's household, and how the money that he gets in return is going to bless him and someone who stands outside his door. So it's all about building the awareness, and contemplative prayer can do the same thing.
So
just different techniques.
Building awareness has to do with becoming more cognizant of God. Or yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, aware of presence. We're also learning to experience life unitively rather than always dualistically. As soon as we think, we're thinking in dualism, because that's what our minds do. It separates things, it categorizes things, it puts them into corners, it makes subject and object. So to be able to move away from the thought process and experience things unitively is to experience them beneath thought somehow. And that's what we're trying to do with mindfulness. We're trying to do with our centering prayer. And here are two other ways that the ancients did it as well. So we're trying to be able to see life as all connected rather than broken up into pieces.
There's a lot to learn. Huh?
Yeah.
I like that though.
All right. Move ahead. Okay, here we go. Here we learn of another way of arriving at unceasing prayer. The prayer continues to pray within me even when I am talking with others or concentrating on manual work. The prayer has become the active presence of God's Spirit guiding me through life. Thus we see how, through charity and the activity of the prayer of Jesus in our heart, the whole day can become a continual prayer. Now, I'm not suggesting that we should imitate the monk Lucius or the Russian pilgrim, but I do suggest that we too, in our busy ministry, should be concerned to pray without ceasing, so that whatever we eat, whatever we drink, whatever we do at all, we do for the glory of God. To love and work for the glory of God cannot remain an idea about which we think once in a while. It must become an interior, unceasing doxology. Make a sense? So what I want to do is take a little sidebar here, because some of you at least have got to be thinking about Brother Lawrence, right? At this point. I mean, is this not the perfect setup for Brother Lawrence? What he just said? I do suggest that we too in our busy ministry should be concerned to pray without ceasing, so that whatever we eat, whatever we drink, whatever we do at all, we do for the glory of God. That's Brother Lawrence to a T. So I'm going to share my screen. And Can you see Brother Lawrence?
Yes.
Okay, good. So this is a shameless plug at my own book, Daring to Think Again, available at Amazon.com for the low price of, you can pick it up anytime you want. So this was, one of the chapters was about this same issue, and I took a couple pages to talk about Brother Lawrence. So for those of you who aren't fully familiar with him or his book, The Practice of the Presence of God, this will give you a little bit of a primer. So first is a pull quote from Brother Lawrence, one of his sayings. Men invent means and methods of coming at God's love. They learn rules and set up devices to remind them of that love. And it seems like a world of trouble to bring oneself into the consciousness of God's presence. Yet it might be so simple. Is it not quicker and easier just to do our common business wholly for the love of him? In 17th century France, a young soldier fighting the 30 Years' War stood staring at a barren tree in the dead of winter. Stripped of its leaves and flowers and fruit, it looked as lifeless as the armored figure before it, arthritic sticks reaching senselessly into a cold sky. But it was at this moment that the fact of God first flashed in upon that soldier's soul, as he realized that what only appeared dead was full of the present of patient life, just waiting for the abundance of spring. That God promised presence, nowhere to be seen on a gray battlefield, still flowed vibrantly just beneath the surface of gnarled bark and distressed metal, awaiting only the slightest suggestion or invitation to burst outward into extravagant life and color. A few years later, the young soldier traded armor for the habit of a Carmelite monastery and took the name Lawrence of the Resurrection. A poor man with no formal education, Brother Lawrence was assigned to the kitchen, the room furthest from the chapel and spiritual center of the priory, the place where the cooking and cleaning and endless tedious tasks would drive anyone's sensation of God's presence right into the ground. Yet it was there in his kitchen, as on a winter battlefield, that Lawrence realized how the presence of patient life flowed just as swiftly among his pots and pans as anywhere else in the world. Again, from Brother Lawrence, the time of business does not with me differ from the time of prayer. And in the noise and clatter of my kitchen, while several persons are at the same time calling for different things, I possess God in as great tranquility as if I were upon my knees at the Blessed Sacrament. Lord of all pots and pans and things, make me a saint by getting meals and washing up the plates. Lawrence began to actually resent the formal times of prayer and worship because they took him away from the place where he served and connected with his brothers at the most fundamental level, the place where he could lose himself in his work and the presence of God he felt so thickly. I have quitted all forms of devotion and set prayers, but those to which my state obliges me. And he was quoted as saying, it was a great delusion to think that the times of prayer ought to differ from other times. That when the appointed times of prayer were past, he found no difference because he still continued with God, praising and blessing him with all his might, so that he passed his life in continual joy. Lawrence spent nearly every moment of the rest of his life within the walls of his priory, working ceaselessly at his cooking and cleaning until old age forced him to mend shoes instead. He said, we ought not to be weary of doing little things for the love of God, who regards not the greatness of the work, but the love with which it is performed. Nor is it needful that we should have great things to do. We can do little things for God. I turn the cake that is frying on the pan for love of him. It is enough for me to pick up but a straw from the ground for the love of God. You gotta love this stuff. Do you remember Mother Teresa said that we cannot do great things in this world? We can only do small things with great love. Another wonderful quote that is echoed here in Brother Lawrence. His entire life was lived in obscurity and poverty. He never taught or traveled or wrote anything down other than a few letters to those who recognized in him the presence of someone who had learned to be truly present to God. Yet those letters and conversations recorded by others were bound into a little book, The Practice of the Presence of God, now a spiritual classic read by millions to this day. as we run in all directions at once, building cathedrals and empires for God. Brother Lawrence, whom we would never have given a second glance amid the grease and fires of his kitchen, quietly carries on, simply living kingdom instead of trying to build it, by being fully present to everyone and everything around him, no matter how seemingly insignificant or distasteful. He found the presence of God everywhere and anywhere he was. Our sanctification does not depend upon our changing our works, but upon our doing that for God's sake, which we commonly do for our own. There is not in the world a kind of life more sweet and delightful than that of a continual walk with God. Those only can comprehend it who practice and experience it. Something we've been talking about a lot. You know, the songs don't make sense until you fall in love. The scriptures aren't going to sing until we have experienced the contemplative presence of God. Brother Lawrence left a trail of breadcrumbs leading directly to the realization that we enter the presence of God in no other way than by simply becoming present ourselves to everything and everyone around us. There's never been any other way. Meditation, prayer, rituals and liturgies, music worship, prayer beads, mantras, even yoga and other physical regimens, all are techniques designed to quiet the conscious mind. That part of us that talks to us, that thinks about our thoughts, the voice in our minds that takes us up and out of the present moment and into the past or the future or the abstract. Quieting that voice is like setting the sun of our consciousness so the stars can come out against a dark sky, so we can finally see the presence everywhere around us. But techniques are just that, techniques and strategies to be used at specific times and places. What about all those moments in between? This is the genius of Brother Lawrence's breadcrumbs, that there is never a moment we need to be outside or unaware of the presence of God, that we can enter God's presence at will, that anytime, any place, we can see the Shekinah, God's tangible presence for the Hebrews, the pillar of fire by night and a cloud by day, that we can get to the point where the strategies we used to employ, the specific times of prayer and worship, become themselves the distractions, the breaks between living our lives as the uninterrupted experience of God. When we turn off the cell phone and really enter into a conversation with a friend, when we push away from our work and look into our child's eyes or the eyes of a coworker and really see them, hear them, help them, when we pull off the road on the way home to watch the last rays of the sun disappear over the horizon, drop our briefcases or purse at the door and take the nearest face in our hands and kiss it, when we picture the people who will benefit from whatever work we do and then do that work better, the best we can, with their faces to guide us, when we engage everything and everyone as if God were intimately present, we are finally beginning to know the truth that will make us free. Because the truth is, God is, and God always was, and God always will be present as we can stand him to be.
That's good.
Got some sayings of Brother Lawrence here, but I think we've read many of them. He says, I began to live as if there were no one save God and me in the world. As often as I could, I placed myself as a worshiper before him, fixing my mind upon his holy presence, recalling it when I found it wandering from him. This proved to be an exercise frequently painful, yet I persisted through all difficulties. If we renounce ourselves, we'll know unspeakable joy. Always turn to Jesus Christ, asking him for his grace that makes everything easy. Neither finesse nor learning is required to approach God. Only a heart resolved to devote itself exclusively to him, loving him only. Ground yourself in God's presence by continually conversing with him. Nourish your soul by focusing your mind on God's glory. Accept the joy that comes from spending time with him. Renew your faith. It's terrible that we have so little. Give yourself completely to God. Abandon yourself to him. Find joy in doing his will in all circumstances. Suffering and joy are synonymous to someone yielded to God. That's an interesting line, isn't it? Suffering and joy are synonymous to someone yielded to God. We must be faithful in times of aridity when God is testing our love for him. And then after he died, they found under his mattress a few pages of these maxims. The only things he really wrote himself besides his letters. We must keep our eyes fixed on God in all we say or do. Our goal is to adore God unceasingly. We must work toward making every action without exception into a kind of brief conversation with God, not in any artificial way, but purely, simply. I like that one. Every action into a kind of brief conversation. That's really cool. Conversation without words, of course. We must always act carefully and deliberately, not impulsively or hurriedly, for those are the marks of a distracted mind. Cooperate gently and lovingly with God. Because you know God is always with you in your deepest core, stop whatever you're doing often and adore him, praise him, ask his help, offer him your heart and thank him. That's interesting. How many times do we during the day stop what we're doing and have that kind of lucidity, that kind of clarity, or just reconnection? The soul that turns inward to practice the presence of God becomes so intimate with him that it spends practically its entire life in continual acts of love, adoration, godly sorrow, trust, thanksgiving, offering, and petition. Sometimes these become one unending act because the soul constantly practices the exercise of Christ's divine presence. And this is from his letters. I think you're getting the gist of it, though. Brother Lawrence, it's kind of been my hero. He's the one that I really look at and been trying to emulate in order to try to get this unceasing prayer and this sense of a mindful presence as a flow throughout my day.
I'd like to share an experience.
Go for it.
To try and I think I had an experience that is very practical and relates to what we're talking about. This is 50 years ago when I was in Boston and I was starting my pre-doctoral training. And I was doing it at the Danielson Counseling Center at Boston University and at Judge Baker in Brookline. And after about 3 months of supervision and work at Danielson, we would do our work in a one-way mirror room. And our supervisor would sit in the other room and observe us and listen to us during our counseling session. So it was interesting. It's kind of like moral development. At first, I experienced it just as a critical mind. You know, I was working very technically, very robotically, very much by the book, trying to do the right things so that my supervisor wouldn't bawl me out afterwards. But then we were able to have conversations. I was able to sit down with a real person and have conversations, and I began to experience them as more helpful than critical. And as the months passed, I found real comfort in it. Because when I'd be sitting in this room with my supervisor on the other, behind the window on the other side, I felt present. I felt like we were working with this person. I felt like it wasn't just me, but I felt like I had some help in terms of doing the work I was doing. And in many ways, that's the way I experienced God's presence. I think I wrote once in that document that you read, Dave, that I often feel accompanied.
Wait, what was that, Brady?
I feel accompanied. That's often the way I experience God's presence. I feel accompanied. I feel there's another set of eyes on my thoughts, my actions, my words. But I don't experience it like I did my supervisor at the beginning for fear of what God is thinking about, what he's seeing and hearing, but rather that I've got help that I can, you know, and receive help if I ask for it. But that experience though of my supervisor behind the one-way mirror, and that kind of change in terms of how I experienced it, something really stuck with me. And it's something I've thought about several times as we've been talking about this issue of praying unceasingly and what that means. Yeah, that's it.
That is great. Now, does that come to mind during your regular day, that God's on the other side of the glass or something?
Yeah, frequently.
Does it?
Frequently.
That is very cool. I love that image.
Yeah, me too.
I was also thinking, use the word, you feel accompanied. Is that what you said? You feel accompanied?
Right.
Have any of you watched a real accompanist playing piano with a single singer, just piano and voice? But have you ever really watched the piano player who is a true accompanist? That piano player is watching the singer like a hawk. Just they're not watching their hands, they're watching the singer, and they're watching for body language, they're watching for movement, so that they can support every phrasing, every nuance. Wherever the singer goes, they're right there to be in the right spot at the right time. And when you said accompanist, that's the first thing that came to me. You feel accompanied. That's the first thing I thought of, is that kind of attention to everything we're doing, every move we make, every change of tone, so that you can be right there and have this complete expression, this complete musical expression. So
it's interesting. I had a similar experience. When I was very young, I played the violin and took lessons and played it for, I don't know, 12, 15 years. My mom was a pianist, a very accomplished pianist. And so when I would practice, she would accompany me on the piano. And I was aware of the fact when I'm really struggling with the violin, it's a really hard instrument to play, and reading music and trying to find my way with it. And was frequently aware of the fact that while I'm doing that, she's playing the piano, but she's watching me. That was really neat. I really cherish those memories. My mom's piano resides in my daughter's house to this day. So it's a little bit of her there still.
I don't know if any of you have had this experience, to be translated by someone, especially if it's ASL, American Sign Language. Have you ever done any public speaking where someone was actually translating ASL for you? So they're flapping in the background while you're speaking. And there was one of the pastors at our church was an ASL translator. And so when we did retreats and things, and I would speak sometimes at the retreats, and he would be translating. And I remember making the comment that I love when he was there, because I know that at least one person was listening to every word that I sang. It's kind of like that, the accompanist is listening, your mom listening to you. If you watch the conductor, same thing. If you're doing a concerto, and so you've got a soloist and the entire orchestra is backing. So that conductor is watching that soloist and doing the same thing that we're talking about here, following every nuance so that everything comes out as one. It's an amazing thing.
Dave, it made me think of an idea you had shared with us years ago about, gratitude being a form of worship. Like when you can move into that place of just gratitude being like a wordless prayer, basically. Like just, and I really like that idea, but I really love Brady's idea of like somebody working with me and accompanying me while I'm doing whatever it is. I think I can, like that image, I can wrap my mind around. I think I can use something like that. Because as we were reading, I was thinking about, some of my lines that I've written down over the years, like, do what love demands, basically. And it seems like a good blend of doing what love demands, functioning from a place of gratitude, and knowing that I'm accompanied in my choices. That would be a nice recipe there.
And I suppose if we really get good at what we're doing here, we can throw the recipe away, because everything, all those three things you just talked about are going to happen simultaneously, right? Doing what love demands, operating out of gratitude, and what was the third one?
Just being accompanied by
Just being accompanied. Yeah. It's all going to happen simultaneously. It's all going to be part of the mix. And so absolutely. But we're going to go from three things down to just one. That's why I love contemplative practice, because you've only got one thing to do. You just keep showing up to the moment. All you're doing is stepping away or through the thought stream. And on the other side of that thought stream, it's like walking through a waterfall. You know, you get to the other side of the waterfall, the water's behind you, and now you're in this still space again. It's kind of like that. You just do that one thing and everything else is added. It's like Jesus said, just seek kingdom first and all else will be added. The kingdom is this space we're talking about on the other side of the waterfall. We just do one thing. Kind of like Curly said in City Slickers, it's just one thing. That's what you got to figure out, just one thing. I think I lost a lot of people at City Slickers. I'm not seeing a lot of comprehension to the illusion there, but okay.
Great Billy Crystal movie.
It was a great movie. If you haven't seen it, check it out. City Slickers.
Yeah.
It's a hero's journey. It's a transformation story. But very funny along the way. Any other thoughts or ways that you all are experiencing ceaseless prayer in your days? We're racking up some really good images here. This idea behind every reflective surface, the supervisor is watching on the other side, accompanying you, watching every movement in perfect sync, right? That's a great image.
Yeah. And wanting to help you.
And wanting to help.
Dave, can I jump in there a second?
Absolutely.
Is that for me?
Yeah, go. Did you want to jump in?
Sorry, I thought I heard somebody else talking.
No.
Yeah, I did want to jump in. I find as I grow older, and certainly my life circumstances and the shape of the journey it's taking, I find that wherever I go, whether I'm driving my car or about ready to eat a meal or watching a good show on TV or something, that I'm always in contact with God's Holy Spirit in me. I'm coming from an attitude of gratitude, unlike any level I've ever experienced in my life. I've tried to be a fairly grateful person all my life, but as I grow older and I want to spend more time pressing in towards the things of God and learn His ways, I just find through appreciation that that's like a secret code language. I feel very connected to God when I express my appreciation for my life, for my friends, for my family, for even the challenges that I get in life. I don't necessarily thank Him that I'm being challenged. I thank Him that He's in the challenge, that He's available for me to access, that His word assures me I'm never going to leave you, I'm never going to forsake you, neither height nor depth. Or, I mean, I don't want to sound like I'm preaching a sermon, but we just get so much assurance from the Bible that God is ready, willing, and able to meet us anytime, any place we're willing to give Him 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 2 minutes, 30 seconds. He's always available. It's not like you're going to call and get a busy signal or, hi, I'm sorry, I'm not available. Leave me a message and I'll get right back to you. And I just love it. It just keeps me in check and makes me feel very content with whether I have, like Paul says, whether I'm in plenty or in want. I just come from that attitude of gratitude and straightens me right out and makes me feel connected all day long and like I'm hanging out with Him all day long. It's like going out to lunch with one of you guys. So that's one of my little tips.
That's great, buddy. And that's total ceaseless practice of presence, right? Scott.
Absolutely. Well, I think it can be all our style. We can be aware that God is in, whether you're treating a patient or whether you're taking care of a chore, or no matter what you're doing, repairing shoes, washing dishes in the previous story, whatever we lay our heart and our mind to, there's always room for God to be involved. I remember when I went to the Harvest Festival when I was a young Christian, and they were handing out Billy Graham tracts, a book that I think there is a story, if I remember the name of it, called My Home, Christ Heart, or Christ Heart, My Home. And it talks about the different rooms in a house and analogizes them to different places in our life that we keep secret sometimes from God. If we open up all our space to God, he'll clean. He'll clean, he'll help, he'll calm, he'll reassure, he'll direct, and he'll provide. He assures us that in his word. And I just take him up on it.
Hi, Dave. I've been reading a book on kind of the business practices of Navy SEALs. And one of the things they said that's kind of got my attention is they say slow is smooth and smooth is fast. And I never thought about that before, but I was kind of struck by when you were reading some of the Brother Lawrence, where he was talking about like being hasty and jerky or impulsive was the sign of a mind that wasn't praying ceaselessly to God. And he was describing how you would physically move about the kitchen, being very deliberate. And so that's one of the things I've been trying to do, and I'm trying to role model for our staff, is that whole idea that, you know, it's okay for them to slow down and get things right. And that ultimately that's going to be what pays off the most for all of us. So I can see that that's a sort of wisdom that comes out of being in a life or death experience or stress. But it's amazing to me that would be, you know, what Navy SEALs would end up teaching each other. So
that's great. It reminds me of a music teacher who told me, you know, when you practice slow, you learn fast. When you practice slow, you learn fast. So kind of along the lines of what the SEALs are saying, although they're using smooth, which is really interesting.
Yeah.
Right? Slow is smooth and smooth is fast. That's, you know, think about that, how that would play out, especially in terms of the kind of operations that they're pulling off. That's really interesting.
And if you watch them when they're on a battlefield, like you'd think that they'd be running crazy to hide, but it's funny, they're actually kind of slothful almost when they move on a battlefield. But I think the reason is that if you do have to defend yourself, you need to keep your body as this stable platform. And if you're moving too quickly, you really can't properly defend yourself. So there's a lot of good reasons behind what they're doing.
Got to keep that gun muzzle steady. Yeah. Wherever you're going, that muzzle has to stay.
But, you know, I could see that, for Brother Lawrence, putting a pot on a hot stove and doing it right and not spilling it and not creating a fire and, you know, not creating a mess. I could see where it, there's a lot of nice analogies there.
Absolutely.
Yeah. You don't want to be rushing around in the kitchen, no.
Or using a knife to cut something up. It's, you can actually harm food and waste it by not cutting it properly. You can actually destroy whether the vegetable's useful in the soup or not if you cut it too thin. I mean, so there's really there's a lot of room for deliberateness in a kitchen.
Yeah. Plus, you don't have to do it over again if you screw it up. We were talking about gratitude and making ourselves grateful, but it's actually, I think, impossible to make ourselves grateful. I think it's impossible to make ourselves happy. Those are byproducts. So what is it that we can actually do? And I've been thinking about this, and I found myself saying this in a session this afternoon. The one thing that we can do is to make ourselves vulnerable. That we can do. And if we do that, then in the connection out of the vulnerability, then we can make we will become happy. We will become grateful. But I think those are the experience of being vulnerable, really. And if you think about it within the seamless practice of the presence of God, what we're doing is making ourselves vulnerable to the moment, vulnerable to the presence, open, dropping our defenses, because until we do that, we're nowhere, right? And so really it is about being willing to stay vulnerable and open to everything and everyone that's around us. And then everything else flows from that.
I don't know if I need to think about whether or not I can make myself experience gratitude. Seems like something I can practice. I mean, it would require being present, and I can see the opening of the heart part, but I'll have to think about that some more.
You think about that.
Yeah, I'm gonna.
It's like the butterfly of happiness. The more you chase it, the more it eludes you. If you sit quietly and it comes and sits on your shoulder, it's kind of like that. Yeah, we talk about counting our blessings, but does that really make us grateful? I think the gratitude comes from the complete connection that occurs when we do let go of our defenses, allow ourselves to be open and vulnerable. And I think that opens us up to the experience of that moment. I think is experienced as gratitude. How do we know that we are open and connected and vulnerable? We feel grateful. That I think is the definition of gratitude, that state of being connected. That there really isn't anything else that is needed in this moment, any more or any less, to make it perfect. It just is already. I think that's it. But let us know what your week of pondering brings you. Even though we won't be here next Wednesday. Remember, it's dark next Wednesday. Is that next Wednesday? Right. Yeah, that's next Wednesday.
Yes.
Yeah. So the Wednesday after that, or the Tuesday. We're still going to be here Tuesday. Any other thoughts? Hi, Kathy. Glad you jumped in. Uh-oh, is she gone? I think she's frozen.
She's frozen.
Yeah, she's frozen. Yeah, she's making us think she's there. She's got one of those video loops going on to make us think she's present when she's really not.
Oh yeah.
Like in all the spy shows.
Yeah.
Okay. Oh, now she's moving. You there, Kathy? Hey, Kathy. You jumped on. So good to see you.
I think I have a bad internet connection here, but I'm trying to listen in. So thank you.
How's mom
Sorry,
doing?
just listening.
How is mom doing?
It's okay.
Yeah.
It's okay. Yeah. A little chaotic. We have some more family showing up and it's just a little chaotic today. So
you sound a little tired.
Yeah.
Well, we're just about done and hopefully you can get some rest. So
yep.
Glad you showed up though. And thank Patricia. She waved the metaphorical record sign for you this evening.
Oh, good. Oh, I'm shirking my duty. So sorry.
Yeah, Patricia filled in for you. She reminded me. That's great. All right. Any last thoughts?
Well, I have a question.
Sure.
I'm going blank now. Is there something that is going to be going on Thursday?
Nope.
And Friendsgiving?
Friendsgiving is Friday.
Friday.
Yeah, okay, then.
William's flying in from Brooklyn to be at Friendsgiving with us. Come on.
Oh, that's good.
Wow.
Yeah. No,
what time do I have to be there?
6 o'clock.
6
p.m. PST. 9 o'clock EST.
I'm already there in spirit. Don't worry about it.
Fine.
On Friday, right?
What's that?
On Friday.
Yes, that's Friday.
Friday.
Not Thursday,
Nothing else
Friday.
that I have to worry about. remembering.
Okay. All right, Scotty, can you give us a closing prayer, my friend?
I can.
Okay, will you?
Gratefully.
All right.
Absolutely. Father, thank you for this group of crazy, lovable, enjoyable, amazing friends, extension of our families, one to another. We work on those connections all the time and sometimes to the detriment of ignoring you. So I pray that our life becomes an expression of gratitude and awareness of your presence always. Your presence brings empowerment, brings peace, brings joy, brings healing, and brings love. All these things we ask for, we express our gratitude in Jesus' holy name. Amen.
Amen. All right, so we'll see you Friday, Sunday, and Tuesday before Thanksgiving. Thanks, everybody.
Sounds
Bye,
great.
everyone.
All right, bye, guys. And
Bye,
happy
Brady.
Thanksgiving.
Bye.
Adieu.
Bye, Jordana. Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Happy Thanksgiving.
All right.
Bye-bye.
Yeah.
Thanksgiving back.
Mm.
Bye.
All right, Jordana and Linda, and William's gone. Okay. Good night, you guys. See you Friday.
Yeah, I will see you Friday, and I
Friday.
will talk to you in a little bit, Linda.
Okay.
Oh, thank you. And I'll see you Friday, Dave.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but we'll talk about that when we're on the phone with you in a couple minutes here. Just give me a couple minutes to do something, and then I'll call you.
If you want to. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, bye.